You keep coming back. Why? The old man's voice cracked like dried wood splitting in winter. His eyes, clouded with age and something heavier, something that looked like decades of stored grief, fixed on the 11-year-old girl standing on his rotting porch with a tray of scrambled eggs and toast. Maya Williams didn't flinch. She never did. "Because you're hungry, Grandpa," she said simply, pushing past him into the dim, cluttered house that smelled of dust, old newspapers, and forgotten time. "And because Mama says kindness don't need a reason." The old man stood frozen in the doorway, his weathered hand still gripping the door frame as if the world might collapse if he let go. His name, or at least the name he gave, was Joseph. Just Joseph. No last name. No history. No explanation for why he lived in the most neglected house on Maple Street, in a neighborhood that had long stopped asking questions about him. To everyone else in Eastbrook, Mississippi, he was a ghost wearing human skin. A cautionary tale whispered at bus stops and church gatherings. "Don't go near that house. That man ain't right. Probably crazy. Probably dangerous." But to Maya, he was just lonely. Now, before I continue, if you're already enjoying this story, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on other stories like this. Trust me, you're going to want to see where this goes. Also, drop a comment telling me what you think Joseph is hiding. Let's see who can guess it. The morning light sliced through the grimy window as Maya set the tray on the kitchen table, a table buried under military history books, faded maps, and yellowed newspaper clippings she'd never dared to read. The kitchen itself was a graveyard of abandonment. Dishes stacked in the sink, a refrigerator humming on its last breath, and a calendar on the wall frozen in October 1987. 37 years ago, Maya had noticed that calendar the first time she wandered into Joseph's yard 6 months ago, chasing her little brother's runaway basketball. She found the old man sitting on his back steps, staring at nothing, his hands trembling around a cup of cold coffee. He hadn't yelled at her. He hadn't even acknowledged her. He just looked hollow. Something in that hollowness had called to her. Something that reminded her of her grandmother after Grandpa Earl died. The way grief could empty a person until they were just a shell walking through days they no longer wanted. So Maya had come back the next day, and the day after that, and every day since. "You don't owe me nothing," Joseph said now, lowering himself into a chair with the careful, painful movements of a man whose body had betrayed him long ago. His frame was still large, broad shoulders, thick hands, but time had carved away the strength that once filled it. "I ain't your responsibility. Nobody said you were." Maya pulled out the chair across from him and sat, watching him with those deep brown eyes that seemed older than her years. "You gonna eat? Or are you gonna let it get cold again?" Joseph stared at the eggs, steam rising from them like tiny prayers. His jaw tightened. Maya noticed the way his hands shook as he reached for the fork. She noticed the way his eyes flickered to the window every few minutes, scanning the street outside with the alertness of a man waiting for something or someone to find him. She'd always noticed, but she never asked. "My mama made the eggs this time," Maya said, filling the silence. "She said if I was going to keep feeding the mystery man, I should at least use fresh eggs from Mrs. Robinson's chickens instead of that store-bought mess." Joseph paused mid-bite. "Your mama knows you come here?" "She knows. And she lets you?" Maya tilted her head, a small smile playing at her lips. "Mama says everybody deserves somebody who sees them. She says the world got too many invisible people." She shrugged. "You were invisible. Now you ain't." Joseph set the fork down. For a long moment, he didn't speak. His eyes gray, distant, carrying storms Maya couldn't name, fixed on her face with an intensity that would have frightened most children. But Maya Williams wasn't most children. She'd grown up in a house where love was loud and sacrifice was quiet, where her mother worked double shifts at the hospital and still found time to braid Maya's hair every Sunday night, where her father had walked out before her second birthday, leaving behind nothing but a closet of empty promises and a mother who refused to let bitterness poison her children. Maya knew what it meant to be overlooked, to be underestimated, to walk through spaces where people looked right through you as if you were made of glass. And she knew, with the bone-deep certainty that children sometimes possess that Joseph wasn't dangerous. He was haunted. Later that morning, as Maya walked the 3 blocks back home before school, she passed Mrs. Patterson watering her roses. The older woman's eyes followed her with the sharp judgment of a woman who had already decided what she thought about everything and everyone. "You still going to that man's house?" Mrs. Patterson called out, her voice dripping with disapproval. Maya paused. "Yes, ma'am." "Chilly. You don't know nothing about him." "Nobody does. He could be a criminal, a murderer. Lord knows what. He's just lonely, Mrs. Patterson." Maya's voice was calm but firm. "And lonely ain't a crime." She kept walking before the woman could respond, her worn backpack bouncing against her shoulders, her mind already drifting to the spelling test she had that afternoon. But something nagged at her. Joseph had been different this morning. More alert, more watchful. Twice she'd caught him staring at an old photograph he kept in his breast pocket, a photo he never showed her, but one she'd glimpsed once. A group of soldiers standing in front of a helicopter, their faces young and proud, and utterly unaware of whatever darkness was coming for them. And when she'd said goodbye, Joseph had done something he'd never done before. He'd taken her hand. His grip was weak, but intentional, his calloused fingers wrapping around her small brown ones like he was trying to hold on to something that kept slipping away. "You're a good girl, Maya," he'd said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Better than this world deserves. Better than I deserve." Before she could respond, he'd let go and turned away, disappearing into the shadows of his house. Maya had stood on that porch for a full minute, unsettled in a way she couldn't explain. Something was wrong. Something was coming. If you're feeling that tension building, drop a like right now. This story is about to take a turn that nobody sees coming. That night, Maya lay in bed, unable to sleep. The house was quiet except for the soft murmur of her mother's television down the hall and the occasional creak of old wood settling. Her little brother, Dante, was already snoring in the bunk below her, lost in whatever dreams filled the minds of 8-year-olds. But Maya's mind wouldn't rest. She kept seeing Joseph's face, the way his eyes had flickered with something that looked almost like fear when a car had driven slowly past his house that afternoon, the way his hands had trembled more than usual, the way he triple-checked the locks on his door before letting her leave. "Who are you running from, Grandpa?" The question had been sitting in her chest for months, growing heavier with each passing day. She'd never asked it out loud because she sensed, with that strange intuition children sometimes have, that the answer would change everything. And maybe she wasn't ready for everything to change. Maya rolled onto her side and stared at the wall, at the faded poster of Harriet Tubman her mother had hung there when she was 7. She was brave, her mother had said. She did what was right even when it was dangerous, even when nobody understood. Maya closed her eyes and whispered into the darkness. But how did she know? How did she know what was right? No answer came. Sleep finally took her somewhere around midnight, pulling her down into dreams of helicopters and soldiers and an old man running through a jungle, flames at his back, ghosts at his heels. The next morning arrived gray and heavy, clouds pressing down on Eastbrook like a hell breath. Maya rose early, as she always did. She moved through the kitchen quietly, pulling out bread and eggs and the small container of orange juice her mother saved for special breakfasts. She assembled the tray with practiced hands, toast with butter, eggs scrambled soft the way Joseph liked, a glass of juice, and a napkin folded into a triangle because it made him almost smile. She was reaching for her jacket when she heard it. Engines, not the rumble of old pickups heading to the lumber mill or the wheeze of school buses warming up for morning routes. These engines were different, heavy, official, the kind of sound that made the neighborhood dogs stop barking and the birds go silent. Maya moved to the window and pulled back the curtain. Her breath caught. 3 black SUVs had rolled to a stop in front of her house. Behind them, a military jeep, its olive paint gleaming dully in the morning mist. Men in uniform, formal, pressed, decorated with medals, were stepping out of the vehicles, their faces carved from stone. Her mother appeared behind her, still in her nightgown, her eyes wide. "Maya," she breathed. What into the doorbell rang? The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot. Maya didn't move. Couldn't move. Her eyes were fixed on the officers, now climbing her porch steps, their boots heavy on the old wood, their movements deliberate and practiced. Her mother pushed past her, cinching her robe, her expression shifting from fear to the fierce protectiveness Maya had seen 100 times before. "Stay behind me," she whispered. She opened the door. The officer at the front was tall, white, gray-haired, with the bearing of a man who had commanded soldiers and decided fates. His uniform was immaculate, covered in ribbons and stars that meant nothing to Maya, but clearly meant everything to the man standing behind him. "Mrs. Williams?" he asked, though it wasn't really a question. "Yes." Her mother's voice was steady, but Maya could see her hands trembling at her sides. "What is this about?" The officer's eyes moved past her mother to Maya, still frozen by the window, the breakfast tray forgotten on the counter behind her. "Ma'am," he said slowly, "we're here about the man your daughter visits. The man at the end of Maple Street." The world tilted. Maya felt it happen, felt the ground shift beneath her feet, felt the air grow thin and sharp, felt something ancient and terrible begin to crack open. "We know you call him Joseph," the officer continued, his voice dropping. "But that's not his name. His name is General Samuel Carter. He was one of the most decorated soldiers in American military history." He paused, and Maya saw something flicker across his face, something that looked almost like grief. 37 years ago, he disappeared. We've been looking for him ever since. And now, because of your daughter, he stopped. Looked at Maya. "Because of your daughter, we've finally found him." The tray slipped from Maya's numb fingers and shattered against the kitchen floor. But she didn't hear it. All she could hear was the roar of blood in her ears and a single, terrible question echoing through her mind. "Who are you, Grandpa? And what did you do?" Now that is the end of part 1, and I promise you, part 2 is going to blow your mind. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Hit that button, drop a comment with your theory about General Carter's past, and give this video a like so I know you want part 2 right now. Let's keep going. I'm not going anywhere until you tell me the truth. Maya stood in the center of her living room, her small frame trembling, not with fear, but with the kind of fierce, righteous anger that only children possess when the world has been caught in a lie. Around her, chaos. Her mother arguing with military officers in hushed, heated tones. Her brother Dante crying upstairs, confused and frightened. Neighbors gathering on the sidewalk outside. Phones raised, whispers spreading like wildfire through the community. But Maya's eyes were fixed on the gray-haired officer, Colonel Harrison Mitchell, he'd called himself, who sat across from her with his hands folded and his expression unreadable. "Young lady," he said carefully, "what I'm about to tell you is classified. It could endanger. He's my friend." Maya's voice cracked, but she didn't look away. "He's the only one who ever listened to me without checking his phone or telling me to hurry up. He's the only one who remembers my birthday. He's the only one who—" She stopped, her throat closing around the words. Colonel Mitchell's expression shifted. Something softened behind his military mask, a flicker of humanity breaking through decades of training. "General Carter," he said quietly, "was a hero, one of the greatest soldiers this country ever produced. He led a special operations unit during the Cold War, ran missions that are still classified to this day, saved more lives than anyone will ever know." He paused, and Maya saw his hands tighten in his lap. But 37 years ago, something happened. A mission went wrong. Good men died. Young men, men with families, men who trusted him. And General Carter, he blamed himself. Maya's heart pounded. What happened? There was a betrayal. Someone on the inside leaked information. Carter's unit walked into an ambush. He was the only survivor. Mitchell's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He spent 3 months in enemy captivity before he escaped. When he finally made it back to American soil, he was awarded the Medal of Honor for his bravery. "So he was a hero," Maya said slowly. "Then why did he disappear?" The colonel's jaw tightened. "Because he couldn't live with it. The government wanted to use him as a symbol, parades, speeches, propaganda. But Carter refused. He said he wasn't a hero. He said heroes don't come home alone." The words hung in the air like smoke. 1 week after he was awarded the medal, Mitchell continued. General Samuel Carter vanished. He left behind his uniform, his medals, his pension, his family, everything. The military searched for years. We assumed he was dead. We held a memorial. His name is on a wall in Washington, D.C. Maya felt tears burning behind her eyes. But he wasn't dead. No. Mitchell's voice was heavy. He was hiding, in plain sight, in a town that didn't know or care who he was. Living as Joseph, letting the world forget him because he couldn't forget what happened. Maya's mother stepped forward, her face a mask of protective fury. And now? What do you want with him now? He's an old man. He can barely walk. He hasn't hurt anyone. Mrs. Williams. Mitchell stood, and for the first time, Maya saw the weight he carried, the exhaustion, the guilt, the decades of searching for a ghost who didn't want to be found. The men who died on that mission, they had children. Those children are grown now. Some of them became soldiers themselves. And one of them has spent his entire life hunting the man he blames for his father's death. The room went cold. His name is Marcus Webb, Mitchell said. He believes General Carter could have saved his father and chose not to. He believes Carter abandoned the mission, abandoned his men, abandoned everything he swore to protect. That's not true, Maya whispered. No, it's not. But Webb doesn't care about the truth. He cares about revenge. Mitchell's eyes locked with Maya's. And we have reason to believe he knows where Carter is. He's coming. And when he gets here, he won't be interested in talking. The world tilted again. But this time, Maya didn't let it knock her down. Now I need you to pause and really take that in. A man driven by decades of revenge is coming for Joseph, and Maya is caught right in the middle. If this story is hitting you in your soul, smash that like button and drop a comment. Tell me, what would you do if you're Maya right now? 2 hours later, Maya stood outside Joseph's house, General Carter's house. She had to remind herself, watching the military officers swarm the property like ants on a hill. They tried to stop her. Her mother had begged her to stay home, to let the adults handle it, to be safe. But Maya couldn't stay away. Not from him. She pushed through the barrier of uniforms and yellow tape, ignoring the shouts behind her, and ran up the porch steps. The door was open. Inside, she could see men in suits going through Joseph's belongings, photographing his cluttered tables, cataloging the fragments of a life he tried so desperately to erase. And there, in the corner of the living room, sat Joseph. General Samuel Carter. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, as if the revelation of his identity had stripped away whatever armor he'd built over 37 years of solitude. His hands trembled in his lap. His gray eyes were fixed on the floor. Grandpa. The word escaped Maya before she could stop it. His head snapped up, and when he saw her, this small, fierce, 11-year-old girl who had broken through his walls with nothing but toast and scrambled eggs, something shattered in his face. Maya, he breathed. You shouldn't be here. Too bad. She crossed the room and knelt in front of him, taking his shaking hands in her own. You lied to me. I know. You let me think you were nobody. You let me think I am nobody. His voice cracked. Not anymore. The man they're looking for, the general, the soldier, the hero, he died a long time ago. In a jungle, surrounded by fire, listening to his men scream while he couldn't. While he couldn't, he broke. Maya had never seen an adult cry like that. Not the polite, quiet tears of her mother when money was tight and prayers weren't answered. This was something else, something primal, something that had been locked away for nearly 4 decades and was finally, violently, breaking free. She held his hands tighter and said nothing. Sometimes silence was the only kindness that mattered. Over the next hour, between sobs and gasps and long stretches of trembling quiet, the truth came out. General Samuel Carter had been 34 years old when he led his unit into the jungles of Southeast Asia on a mission that was supposed to take 3 days. They were extracting a defector, a high-value target with information that could shift the balance of the Cold War. But someone had sold them out. The ambush came at night, when they were most vulnerable. Mortars screamed from the tree-line. Gunfire erupted from every direction. Carter's men, young men, brave men, Men who had followed him into hell because they believed in him, fell one by one. Carter fought. He fought with everything he had. He dragged wounded soldiers to cover, returned fire until his rifle jammed, called for extraction that never came. And when it was over, when the jungle went quiet and the smoke cleared, he was the only one still breathing. They found him 3 months later, half dead in an enemy camp, his body broken, but his mind somehow intact. The military called it a miracle. Carter called it a curse. I should have died with them, he whispered, his eyes hollow. Every day since then, I've wondered why I didn't. Why I was the one who got to live. Why God chose to punish me with survival. Maya felt tears streaming down her own face now. That's not punishment, isn't it? He looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw every ghost he'd carried, every nightmare that had chased him into this rotting house in a forgotten corner of Mississippi. 53 years I've been on this earth since that night. 53 years of waking up to faces I couldn't save. 53 years of hearing them call my name. He pulled his hand away and reached into his pocket. When he withdrew it, he was holding the photograph Maya had glimpsed so many times. The one of young soldiers standing in front of the helicopter, their smiles bright, their futures infinite. These are my brothers, he said, his voice barely audible. Reynolds, Gutierrez, Thompson, Webb, Kowalski, Martinez, Nguyen, Jackson. He touched each face with trembling fingers. They trusted me to bring them home, and I failed. Maya reached out and gently took the photograph from his hands. She looked at the young faces, frozen forever in a moment before tragedy, and felt her heart break for men she'd never known. Then her eyes caught something. One of the soldiers, a young black man with kind eyes and a crooked smile, had his arm around Joseph's shoulders. Samuel's shoulders. They looked close. Brothers, as Joseph had said. Who was he? She asked softly, pointing. Joseph's breath hitched. Sergeant David Jackson. He was my best friend. My confidant. The godfather of my... He stopped. Maya looked up. The godfather of your what? Joseph's face went pale. And before he could answer, before Maya could push further, the front door exploded inward. The man who stepped through the shattered doorframe was tall, broad, and radiating fury. He was perhaps 50 years old, with dark skin, a shaved head, and the muscular build of someone who had spent decades turning his body into a weapon. Behind him, Maya could hear shouting. Colonel Mitchell's voice barking orders, officers scrambling to respond. But the man didn't care about any of them. His eyes were locked on Joseph. Samuel Carter, he said, his voice shaking with decades of rage. You finally stopped running. Joseph rose slowly from his chair, putting himself between Maya and the intruder. Marcus Webb, the son of one of the fallen soldiers. The man Colonel Mitchell had warned them about. Get behind me, Maya, Joseph said quietly. But Maya didn't move. Something in her had calcified, some deep, stubborn core that refused to let fear make her decisions. 37 years, Marcus snarled, stepping closer. 37 years, I've waited to look you in the eye. To make you answer for what you did to my father. I didn't kill your father, Marcus. No, you just let him die. Marcus's hand moved to his waist, where Maya could see the outline of a weapon. You left him. You saved yourself while he bled out in that jungle. That's not what happened, liar. The word echoed through the room like a thunderclap, and in the chaos that followed, the shouting, the scuffling, the desperate attempts of military officers to subdue a man driven mad by grief, Maya did something no one expected. She stepped forward, placed herself directly between Marcus Webb and the man he wanted to destroy, and spoke. He didn't leave your father. Marcus froze. The officers froze. Even Joseph, his face pale with terror, went still. Maya lifted the photograph she was still holding and pointed at the young black soldier with the kind eyes. This was your father, she said quietly. Sergeant David Jackson. Joseph talked about him all the time. He said David was the bravest man he ever knew. He said David died protecting him, pushing him to cover when the mortars hit. He said David's last words were live for us. Her voice broke, but she kept going. Joseph didn't run. He survived. Because your father made him survive. Because your father loved him like a brother. The room was silent. Marcus Webb stared at her, this 11-year-old girl standing barefoot in a destroyed living room, holding a 37-year-old photograph like a shield. And then, slowly, terribly, his face crumbled. "You're lying," he whispered. But even he didn't believe it anymore. Behind Maya, Joseph sank to his knees. "David saved my life," he said, his voice raw. "He threw himself on me when the grenade hit. Took the shrapnel meant for me. And with his last breath, he told me to go home. To live. To make it mean something." Joseph's voice shattered. "But I couldn't. I couldn't make it mean anything. Because I wasn't worthy of the sacrifice he made. I wasn't." He broke down completely. And Marcus Webb, the man who had spent his entire life preparing for vengeance, stood frozen, watching his hatred dissolve into something far more complicated, far more human. What followed was chaos. Marcus was taken into custody. Military officers secured the perimeter. Neighbors were pushed back behind barricades, their phones confiscated, their questions ignored. And Maya, exhausted, overwhelmed, changed in ways she couldn't yet understand, sat on Joseph's porch as medics checked his vitals and officers argued about what came next. She didn't realize she was still holding the photograph until Colonel Mitchell sat down beside her. "You did something extraordinary today," he said quietly. Maya didn't respond. That man, Marcus Webb, he's been planning this for years. He had weapons, explosives, a detailed map of every entrance to this house. Mitchell shook his head. He was going to kill General Carter, and probably himself afterward. Maya felt her stomach turn. "So I stopped him." "No." Mitchell's voice was heavy. "You reached him. You reminded him that his father wasn't just a victim. He was a hero who made a choice. A choice to save his brother." He paused. "That photograph you found, the story you told, it changed everything." Maya looked at the image again, at David Jackson's kind eyes. "Joseph's been carrying them all this time," she whispered. "The ghosts, the guilt. He thought if he hid, if he disappeared, he could punish himself enough to deserve what they sacrificed." "And what do you think?" Mitchell asked. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "I think ghosts don't want us to punish ourselves. I think they want us to live." She looked up at the gray Mississippi sky. Really live. That night, as Maya finally returned home, as her mother held her tight and cried and promised they would never speak of this again, Maya felt something settle in her chest. But it wasn't peace. Not yet, because there was still one question she hadn't asked. One secret Joseph hadn't revealed. The godfather of Mai. He'd stopped, cut himself off, and in the chaos that followed, she'd forgotten. But now, lying in her bed as the world outside finally went quiet, Maya remembered. Joseph had a family, or he'd had a family, and somewhere out there, they were still waiting. That's the end of part 2, and I know you're sitting there with your heart pounding, wondering what happens next. Part 3 is where everything comes together. The final revelation, the reunion, and an ending that's going to stay with you for days. If you're not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and drop a comment telling me if you think Joseph's family will forgive him. Now let's finish this story. I need to see him. 3 weeks had passed since the military arrived on Maya's doorstep. 3 weeks since Marcus Webb was taken into custody, since Joseph's identity was exposed, since the quiet corner of Eastbrook, Mississippi became international news. Hidden Hero found after 37 years. The incredible story of General Samuel Carter, the headline screamed from every news outlet. Reporters camped outside Maya's house, desperate for interviews with the brave little girl who had stopped a madman with nothing but a photograph and the truth. Her mother refused them all, shielding her children with a fierceness that made Maya's heart ache with gratitude. But now, standing in Colonel Mitchell's temporary office at the local community center, Maya was done being shielded. "I need to see him," she said again. Mitchell sighed. "Maya, the general is in a military medical facility undergoing evaluation. His health is failing." Maya's voice was steady. "Because he's giving up. Because he thinks this is how his story ends. Exposed, alone, with nothing left to hide behind." Mitchell stared at her. "How do you know that?" he asked quietly. "Because I know him." Maya stepped forward, her hands clenched at her sides. "For 6 months, I brought him breakfast. I sat with him when the nightmares came. I listened when he talked about things he'd never told anyone else. Not the classified stuff, but the real stuff. The stuff that mattered. Her voice cracked. He's not some file in your cabinet, Colonel. He's not a symbol or a scandal or a news story. He's a person, and he's dying because he doesn't believe anyone will miss him when he's gone. The room went silent. Mitchell stood slowly, his face unreadable. Then, to Maya's shock, he moved to his desk and picked up a phone. "Give me Captain Peters," he said. "Tell him we're bringing a visitor to the facility. Highest priority authorization." He looked at Maya. "You've got 30 minutes." The military hospital was a sterile maze of white walls and fluorescent lights. Maya walked beside Colonel Mitchell, her worn sneakers squeaking against polished floors, her heart pounding with every step. Doctors and nurses glanced at her curiously. A few whispered to each other. But Mitchell's presence, and the armed escorts flanking them, made sure no one interfered. They stopped outside a door marked only with a number, 217. Mitchell turned to her. "He's weak. He's been refusing food, refusing treatment. The doctors don't understand why someone who survived so much would just give up." Maya understood. "He's tired," she said softly. "Tired of carrying weight that was never his to carry alone." She pushed open the door. The room was dim, lit only by the gray light filtering through barred windows. Medical equipment beeped steadily in the corner. And there, in the center of a narrow hospital bed, lay General Samuel Carter. He was smaller than she remembered, thinner. The vibrant, haunted man who had gripped her hand and called her a good girl seemed to have faded, like a photograph left too long in the sun. But when he heard her footsteps, his eyes opened. And when he saw her face, something flickered in their depths. Maya. Her name was a whisper, a prayer. She crossed the room and sat on the edge of his bed, taking his hand the way she always did, gently, firmly, without hesitation. "You stopped eating," she said. "I'm tired." "I know. I'm so tired, Maya. I know." He turned his face toward the window, and she saw the tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. "They found me. After everything, after all those years of hiding, they found me. And now everyone knows. Everyone knows what I did, what I failed to do. What you survived," Maya corrected quietly. "Survival isn't heroism." "No," she agreed. "But it's not cowardice either." She squeezed his hand. "You once told me that your men died because someone betrayed them. That there was a leak, someone on the inside who sold their mission to the enemy." She paused. "Did they ever find out who it was?" Joseph was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, "Yes." "Who?" His eyes closed. "A man named Colonel William Harrison. He was high up in military intelligence. He sold information to the enemy for money, classified routes, mission details, troop movements. My unit wasn't the only one he destroyed, just the most public." Maya felt something cold settle in her chest. "Was he punished?" "He was executed," Joseph said flatly. "Military tribunal, closed to the public. But by then, the damage was done. My men were dead. I was broken. And the military decided it was cleaner to let me disappear than to reveal how deeply they'd been compromised." Maya stared at him. "They let you vanish?" "They encouraged it. Gave me resources to start over. A new identity, a new location, a pension I never touched. In exchange, I agreed never to speak about what happened, never to reveal the extent of the betrayal." His voice grew bitter. "I became their dirty secret, and I was happy to be forgotten. I wanted to be forgotten. And now..." He opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her, with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Now I don't know what I am. They're calling me a hero again. Giving interviews about my service, my sacrifices, my bravery. But none of it feels real. None of it feels earned." Maya was quiet for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out something she'd been carrying for 3 weeks. A folded photograph. The same one from Joseph's house. The soldiers, the helicopter, the brotherhood frozen in time. "I kept it," she admitted. "I hope that's okay." Joseph's eyes widened. His hand trembled as he took it from her. "I've been looking at it every night," Maya continued. "Trying to see what you see. Trying to understand why you carry so much guilt for something that wasn't your fault. She pointed at the young faces. These men trusted you. They followed you into danger because they believed in you. And when everything went wrong, when the world betrayed them, you were the one who lived to remember them. Her voice grew stronger. That's not a punishment, Grandpa. That's a responsibility. Joseph stared at the photograph, his face crumbling. I don't know how to honor them. I've spent 37 years hiding, running, trying to punish myself for surviving. I don't know how to. Start small. He looked up. Maya smiled softly. Start with breakfast. If that moment just hit you in your heart, take a second and like this video. We're almost at the end, and trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next. The recovery wasn't immediate. Healing never is. But over the following weeks, something shifted in General Samuel Carter. He began eating again, began speaking with the therapist the military had assigned, began, slowly, painfully, to accept that survival wasn't a betrayal. And through it all, Maya was there. She visited every Saturday and Sunday, armed with homemade food and stories about school and detailed accounts of Dante's latest mischief. She made Joseph laugh, something she'd rarely seen in 6 months of morning visits. She made him present, anchoring him to a life he'd spent decades trying to escape. But it was the revelation that came 6 weeks after his exposure that changed everything. Maya was sitting in the hospital cafeteria, picking at a plate of mashed potatoes, when Colonel Mitchell found her. "We need to talk," he said. His face was strange, complicated, and beneath his military composure, Maya could see something that looked almost like hope. "What is it?" Mitchell sat down across from her. When General Carter disappeared 37 years ago, he left behind more than a career. He left behind a wife, a daughter. Maya felt the world tilt. His wife died 15 years ago, Mitchell continued. But his daughter, Catherine, she's alive. She's been searching for him ever since her mother passed. Hired private investigators, followed every lead, refused to believe he was really dead. He paused. "We contacted her after the story broke. She's flying in tomorrow." Maya couldn't speak. Joseph has a daughter. All this time, all those years of isolation, he had someone looking for him. "Does he know?" She finally managed. "Not yet." Mitchell's eyes softened. "That's why I'm telling you first. I thought you might want to be there. When we tell him." Maya nodded slowly. "Tomorrow. Everything would change tomorrow." Catherine Carter was 54 years old, with her father's gray eyes and her mother's quiet grace. She arrived at the hospital with trembling hands and a strength that reminded Maya of her own mother. The kind of strength that only comes from carrying impossible weight and refusing to fall. They met in the hospital lobby, and Maya was struck by how ordinary Catherine seemed. Not wealthy or powerful or dramatic. Just a woman who had spent half her life searching for a father who didn't want to be found. "You're the girl," Catherine said softly, her eyes shining. "The one who found him." "I just brought him breakfast," Maya replied. Catherine shook her head. "You brought him back. There's a difference." They walked together to Joseph's room, flanked by Colonel Mitchell and a small army of nurses. Catherine's breathing grew faster with each step. Her hands twisted together. By the time they reached the door, she was visibly shaking. Maya took her hand. "He's scared too," she said quietly. "He spent 37 years believing he didn't deserve to be found, believing that everyone he loved was better off without him." She looked up at Catherine. "He was wrong. Help him see that." Catherine nodded, tears streaming down her face. And together, they opened the door. What happened next would stay with Maya forever. She would remember the way Joseph's face transformed when he saw his daughter. The disbelief, the terror, the desperate, devastating hope that broke through decades of carefully constructed walls. She would remember the way Catherine ran to his bedside, falling to her knees, sobbing "Daddy," over and over, as if the word itself could heal 37 years of absence. She would remember the way Joseph's hands, those trembling, weathered hands that had gripped photographs and door frames in her own small fingers, reached out to cup his daughter's face, his voice breaking as he said, "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't think. I thought you were better off. I was trying to protect you from what I'd become." And she would remember Catherine's response, fierce, tender, absolute. "You were never a burden, Daddy. You were never broken beyond repair. You were lost, and now you're found. In that moment, watching a father and daughter reunite after nearly 4 decades of separation, Maya understood something profound. Kindness wasn't always about grand gestures. It wasn't about saving the world or becoming a hero. Sometimes, it was as simple as showing up, again and again, even when no one asked you to, even when no one expected you to. She had brought an old man breakfast, and somehow, that breakfast had led to this. 1 year later, Maya stood on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C., wearing a dress her mother had saved 3 months to buy. Around her, hundreds of people had gathered. Military officials in full dress uniforms, politicians with practice smiles, journalists with cameras and microphones. And in the front row, Catherine Carter, her husband, her 3 grown children, Joseph's grandchildren, all watching with tear-filled eyes. Maya still didn't fully understand how she'd ended up here. After the reunion, after the healing, after the long months of Joseph rebuilding his relationship with his daughter and meeting grandchildren he never knew existed, someone had decided that the story of Maya Williams and General Samuel Carter deserved to be told. Not just told, honored, which was why Maya was now standing beside the President of the United States, about to receive the Congressional Gold Medal for Humanitarian Service, the youngest recipient in history. For extraordinary compassion, the President was saying, her voice echoing across the crowd. For the courage to see humanity where others saw only mystery. For the simple, profound act of showing up every morning with kindness and without expectation. Maya felt her cheeks burning. Her mother was crying in the audience. Dante was making faces, trying to make her laugh. And Joseph, General Samuel Carter, now restored to his proper rank and recognition, sat in a wheelchair beside Catherine, watching Maya with something that looked like wonder. "You saved me," his eyes said. No, Maya thought back. We saved each other. After the ceremony, after the handshakes and photographs and overwhelming attention, Maya found Joseph sitting alone in a quiet garden behind the memorial. He looked different now, healthier. The color had returned to his cheeks. His hands trembled less. And when he smiled, which he did more often now, the ghosts in his eyes seemed gentler somehow. "Some party, huh?" Maya said, dropping onto the bench beside him. "I hate parties," he grumbled, but his tone was fond. "Too much noise. Too many people pretending they know you when they really just know what they read in the papers." Maya smiled. "You never did like crowds." "Never." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon light filter through the cherry blossom trees. "Maya," Joseph said finally, "can I ask you something? Anything." He turned to look at her, and his gray eyes, those eyes that had seen war and loss and decades of darkness, were shining. "Why? Why did you keep coming back? All those months when I was nothing but a grumpy old man in a rotting house. Why didn't you give up on me?" Maya thought about the question. She'd been asked some version of it 100 times in the past year, by journalists, by counselors, by her teachers. She'd given polished answers about kindness and compassion and seeing the humanity in everyone. But here, now, with Joseph, she wanted to be honest. "Because I know what it feels like," she said quietly. "To be overlooked, to be invisible, to walk through life feeling like you don't matter." She paused. "When my dad left, I was 18 months old. I don't remember him at all, just the shape of his absence, like a shadow that never quite goes away. And for a long time, I thought that absence meant something was wrong with me, that I wasn't worth staying for." Joseph's face softened. "But then I saw you, sitting on those steps, alone, forgotten. And I thought, maybe if I could make you feel less invisible, I would feel less invisible too." She looked up at him. "Turns out, kindness works both ways. You didn't just give me a place to bring breakfast. You gave me purpose. You gave me someone who listened, who remembered, who made me feel like I mattered." Her voice broke. "You saved me too, Grandpa. I hope you know that." Joseph reached over and took her hand, the same way she'd taken his 100 times across 100 mornings. "I know," he said hoarsely. "Believe me, Maya, I know." That evening, as Maya and her family prepared to fly back to Mississippi, Joseph pressed something into her hand. It was a small, velvet box. "Open it when you're ready," he said. "Not before." Maya nodded, slipping the box into her coat pocket. At the airport, she hugged Catherine goodbye. She hugged Joseph's grandchildren, teenagers now, fascinated by this 12-year-old girl who had somehow become a national hero. And she hugged Joseph himself, holding on longer than she probably should have, memorizing the smell of his cologne and the steadiness of his breathing. "I'll see you soon," she whispered. "Every Saturday," he agreed. Catherine already promised to make sure I answer the video calls. Maya laughed through her tears, and then she was gone, walking toward the security checkpoint with her mother and brother, leaving behind the whirlwind of the past year and returning to the ordinary, extraordinary life she'd always known. It wasn't until she was on the plane, somewhere over Tennessee, that Maya finally opened the velvet box. Inside was a medal. The Medal of Honor that General Samuel Carter had received 53 years ago for surviving what couldn't be survived, for carrying ghosts that wanted to drag him under. And beneath the medal, a handwritten note. "Maya, for 37 years, this medal was my shame. A reminder of what I lost, not what I survived. But you taught me something I should have learned long ago. The greatest courage isn't fighting battles or surviving ambushes. It's showing up. Every day, even when it hurts. Even when no one's watching. You showed up for me when no one else would. You saw me when I wanted to be invisible. You refused to let me disappear. This medal belongs to you now. Not because of what I did, but because of who you are. You are the bravest person I've ever known. All my love, now and forever." Grandpa Maya read the note 3 times, tears streaming down her face. Her mother looked over, alarmed. "Baby, what?" But Maya just shook her head, clutching the medal to her chest, feeling the weight of it, the history, the sacrifice, the impossible hope. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the clouds, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And somewhere below, in a city she'd never imagined visiting, a lonely old man was learning how to live again. Because a little girl had brought him breakfast. Because kindness, even the smallest kind, could echo through generations. Because sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expect. They're the ones who simply stay. And that's the end of our story. If this touched your heart, if it made you feel something real, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button. Leave a comment telling me your favorite moment from this story. And share this with someone who needs to hear that their small acts of kindness matter more than they know. Thank you for staying with me until the very end. I'll see you in the next one.